In the beginning, before we are even aware of what the world means, pain is one of the first sensations that shapes our experience. It alerts us in infancy when we touch something sharp, and it teaches us in childhood when we fall. Pain has always held a role in the story of human survival, a quiet guardian disguised as discomfort. To most of us, it is a part of life that we would rather avoid, and yet without it, we might not endure. Imagine a life where this darker companion, that unpleasant yet protective feeling, was missing entirely. Imagine a world where the body provides no warnings, where burns cause no cry, where broken bones may only be discovered because the body bends unnaturally and not because it pleads for help. That life exists, though it belongs to only a very few. This rare existence belongs to those who were born into a genetic anomaly known as congenital insensitivity to pain. For many, hearing those words for the first time may sound like a blessing in disguise. No headaches, no toothaches, no cuts that sting, no exhausting reminders that the body can suffer. But as we are about to discover, it is not a gift. It is instead a complicated truth that strips away one of nature's most essential guardians. Pain, so often thought of as cruel, is in fact a language of protection, and when that language is silenced, life becomes a quiet but constant conversation with danger. In this exploration, we are invited to step into the hidden world of people who do not feel pain, to discover what it means to live without this signal, how it is both fascinating and frightening, and why it reveals more about what it means to be human than we might first think. When night falls and the mind begins to slow, our curiosity opens different doors. That is why this story is best told in the stillness of calm, as a gentle reflection rather than a restless lecture. As you close your eyes and listen, imagine yourself moving through this story as though it were a dream, where each description floats onward, where the voices of science, medicine, and the lives of real people blend to create a journey quiet enough to fall into, even as the subject matter is extraordinary. We begin not with urgency, but with wonder, for the truth of those who cannot feel pain does not arrive with sudden noise, but with the soft weight of disbelief. Congenital insensitivity to pain, or CIP, is among the rarest of genetic anomalies. Across a planet of billions, only a few hundred documented cases have been described. Each one a unique story, each one a portrait of survival without one of the most universal dimensions of the human condition. Pain, after all, is not selective. It crosses languages before words are learned, it breaks through barriers of culture and age, binding us all with its sharp punctuation that says stop, do not continue, something is wrong. Those who have CIP live in a body that lacks this punctuation, a page that continues with no pause, no alert, no protective signal. Their lives tell us, with great clarity, what happens when one of nature's instructions is simply missing, as though a sentence were written without the final period, trailing on without conclusion. Step into the house of a family where this anomaly is real. A child plays freely, laughing, touching surfaces, climbing, falling, only the laughter remains. There are no tears from scraped knees, no cries from bruised elbows. For many parents, the absence of wailing might seem like peace at first, an easy toddler, a blessing of quiet in the chaotic years of growth. But soon, unsettling realizations arrive in the form of burns discovered only by blisters that appear later, or fractures that reveal themselves not through agony but through limping. Pain teaches most children to avoid fire, to step away from sharp edges, to slow down when a limb feels strained. For a child with CIP, life has no such warnings. They must be guided constantly, watched endlessly, their safety determined not by their felt instincts but by careful supervision from those who love them. As this understanding begins to sink in, a subtle unease takes root. What was imagined as liberation from suffering reveals itself as a hidden prison of constant vigilance. Consider your own experiences, the sharp slice of paper on your fingertip, the sting of hot water brushing the skin, the ache of muscle after exertion. In each case, the pain may frustrate you in the moment, but soon it passes, leaving behind a lesson that is quietly stored for survival. Touch the flame once, and you do not need reminding to avoid it again. Stub a toe against a heavy corner, and your body soon remembers the angle of the obstacle. At the heart of CIP lies the tragic absence of these memories. To be without pain is to be without the ability to learn from harm, to navigate life's hazards through the very signals that protect us. In this journey, there is both a scientific mystery and a deeply human story. On one hand, researchers gaze upon CIP as a rare window into the wiring of the nervous system, providing clues that may one day relieve the suffering of those who experience too much pain, such as patients with chronic conditions. On the other hand, families face the daily struggles of keeping children safe within a fragile balance between freedom and restriction. Within this contrast lies the heart of our exploration, the duality of pain as both torment and teacher, and the strange existence that unfolds when it is absent. As you listen, let the rhythm of this reflection slow your mind, moving like waves upon a quiet shore, bringing both calm and focus. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine not the chaos of laboratories or the clinical sharpness of hospitals, but the weaving together of lives lived differently. Imagine faces illuminated by both worry and resilience, children whose laughter must be monitored carefully, adults who move through the world with scars they never felt forming. This documentary is not told with the urgency of alarm, but with the steady tone of contemplation. It is a gentle unwrapping of the truth that pain, even in its harshness, is one of life's greatest protectors. Without it, danger walks quietly at our side, unseen, unannounced, yet no less real. So we begin this exploration with an open mind, stepping into the delicate silence of a condition where absence becomes louder than presence. As the body falls into rest, allow these words to hold you softly, guiding you into the heart of a mystery few will ever encounter. Congenital insensitivity to pain is not simply a medical anomaly. It is a reminder written into rare lives of just how much suffering builds our resilience, how much discomfort makes survival possible, and how, even as we wish pain away, it remains one of our most faithful protectors. This is the world we are about to enter, an unseen frontier of human experience, one gentle revelation at a time. The silence that surrounds this condition is perhaps the most striking part of it. Where most bodies cry out through jolts and pangs, a body with congenital insensitivity to pain remains quiet. Imagine walking barefoot across a stone path. For most, each uneven surface calls attention with pressure that shifts, sometimes sharp, sometimes smooth, teaching the foot where to step. But in the body of someone with this genetic anomaly, that language is missing. Each step is only movement, not warning. The rocks become no different from soft earth, nails no different from polished wood, shattered glass no different from clean floors. This absence stretches beyond the foot, extending into every corner of the body, until the world itself becomes an environment without alarms. And strangely, that environment, though invisible, becomes one of the most dangerous places to inhabit. As the nervous system builds itself in early life, intricate webs of fibers and signals wrapped throughout the body, delicate cords carrying messages faster than thought. These messages are sensations: heat and cold, texture and pressure, and, most significantly, pain. They warn of imbalance, tear, burn, infection. Without them, the body is adrift. Congenital insensitivity to pain does not mean other senses vanish. The vision remains clear, hearing works, and taste and touch still color experience. A child can still feel the gentle brush of a mother's hand, the softness of fabric, the coolness of water. What is missing is the harsh edge, the protective sting. And within that missing piece lies a fragile life shaped not by lack of sensitivity, but by lack of boundaries. Pain is not absence, but presence. Its absence is what creates emptiness. Parents often realize too late that their child lives without this safeguard. In the first months of life, babies often cry from discomfort, signaling hunger, cold, or irritation. But children with CIP may confuse caregivers by their unusual quietness. Injuries arrive silently: bites to the tongue that draw blood but no tears, burns from hot bottles that leave scars but no scream. What might seem at first like strength or resilience is, in fact, a haunting silence. Parents begin to understand only after repeated incidents pile into patterns. A doctor examines lingering wounds, bandages are applied long after damage has advanced, and specialists are called to explain the impossible truth: the body does not know pain. From this realization springs a lifelong journey that is not liberation from suffering, but a burden of vigilance so constant it becomes a background rhythm of existence. The genetic foundation of this condition is a message coded into the body's architecture, hidden in sequences of DNA that determine how signals travel across nerves. Mutations in certain genes silence the protein channels that normally allow electrical impulses to announce pain. It is as though the body has been wired with circuits that never connect to the alarm. The system continues to function in other ways. The nerves still deliver information about motion and position, the muscles still move to command, but the protective signal is lost. Science looks at this riddle with fascination, for in studying those who feel no pain, researchers hope to one day help those who feel too much. The very genes that remove pain may also hold keys to easing chronic suffering. And yet, for families who live with CIP, research is both promise and shadow, a reminder that the anomaly that scientists cherish as a window into biology is at the same time a daily test of endurance. Consider the everyday life of a young child in this world. Playgrounds, normally spaces of laughter and scrapes, become settings of hidden peril. A fall from a swing may lead to fractures unnoticed until the bone refuses to carry weight. Climbing a slide may leave splinters buried beneath skin that never signaled intrusion. Even the mundane acts of chewing food or brushing teeth can lead to wounds inside the mouth, where tongues may chew themselves unknowingly or teeth may erode without protests of irritation. Over time, scars accumulate across the body, silent records of injuries never felt. The child becomes a map of danger unspoken. And though laughter still arrives, though happiness and personality remain untouched, an invisible current of risk moves beneath every joyful act. Nighttime for these families is different as well. As most children sleep peacefully, wounds from the day healing beneath layers of comfort, a child with CIP may turn in sleep and worsen unnoticed injuries. Parents often check through the night, gently lifting blankets, searching for swelling, finding bruises that should have spoken but remained hidden. Fatigue wears at the caretakers, and yet they cannot rest fully. The absence of pain in their child demands their endless awareness. And so, in these households, night carries not only dreams but a different kind of watchfulness, a guard placed at the border of silence. As the child grows older, new challenges appear. Pain normally teaches restraint. Without it, boundaries remain invisible. Adolescents with CIP may push their bodies beyond natural limits while running, exercising, or playing sports. Muscles tear without notice, joints erode from pressure never eased. Some may walk on broken bones, unaware until the body buckles beneath the weight. Doctors can repair, casts can hold, but the injuries continue, each one discovered only by accident. And with adolescence comes the awareness that they're different, that the normal rules others follow, rules set by the body's natural alerts, do not apply. This awareness can feel isolating, a strange distance from peers who wince, who limp, who cry out. Adulthood does not end the challenges. Daily life becomes a careful balancing act of regulation. Cooking carries risk, hot pans burn without notice, knives slice without sting. Driving, walking, working all demand a kind of attention others naturally possess. While some develop strategies to compensate, others struggle with repeated hospital visits, surgeries, and the invisible toll of scars. And beyond the physical body, there is also the shadow cast on the mind. Constant monitoring creates anxiety, sometimes frustration, as freedom feels chained to caution. The mind is forced to think about what most people never think about, the constant measurement of risk. And in this context, the simple gift of feeling pain reveals its true value. Yet even in this condition, resilience shines. Families learn routines, create checklists, and innovate care. They build bonds strengthened by trust and attention, with siblings becoming protectors, parents becoming lifelong guardians, and community becoming vital. Stories surface of children whose laughter remains bright, whose creativity and curiosity are no less vibrant, whose capacity for joy defies what the condition could impose. The human spirit adapts, as it always has, to circumstances no matter how rare. And in this adaptation lies beauty, a delicate testament to survival not in spite of the absence of pain, but in delicate partnership with vigilance and love. Scientific research never looks at CIP simply as a curiosity. Behind every experiment lies the potential for profound application. For those who suffer from unyielding pain, for patients in hospitals medicated endlessly to dull the constant signal, the mysteries of CIP present hope. If scientists can understand which channels block pain entirely, they may discover ways to dim it selectively. The child who walks without burning footsteps may teach medicine how to soothe the elderly who carry decades of arthritis. The rare few living in silence may hold answers for the many living in agony. Thus, even in rarity, their role is immense. And so the story unfolds not as one of tragedy alone, but as a complex balance between gift and curse, between warning and silence. To lie in bed and imagine this life is to reflect on our own bodies, on the subtle signals we so often dismiss as nuisances. The headache that interrupts work, the sprain that demands rest, the sharp ache that forces us to pause, all are teachers. They carve boundaries in our days, fences that keep us from wandering into permanent harm. To live without them is to inhabit a world without fences, where every step could be across unseen cliffs. This is the paradox at the heart of CIP. The absence of suffering creates the presence of danger. The deeper one contemplates, the more layers reveal themselves. Pain, unwanted as it may be, is elemental to our learning. It shapes memory, it binds action, and it teaches empathy. To know pain is to know the fragility of the human condition, to recognize it in others, and to respond with compassion. Those without it sometimes struggle not only with danger but with connection, for empathy grounded in shared sensation becomes an abstraction. And yet their stories remind us of empathy in its truest sense, not only feeling another's pain, but acknowledging what cannot be felt at all. As you drift further into calm, let the echoes of this truth linger softly. We live in bodies tuned by signal and alert. Those signals are not flaws but guardians, silent companions that push us away from the fire, guide us back from the edge, and slow us down when haste breaks the body's harmony. For most, these companions are ignored, cursed, resented. For a few, their absence is a lifelong reminder that what we resent may well be what preserves us. In silence, they move through their days, carrying stories written in scars, stories that speak not of pain endured, but of pain that never spoke at all. The further we journey into the quiet story of life without pain, the more we come to see its contours not only in science, but in lived reality. As night deepens and you settle more softly into stillness, let us imagine how every stage of life becomes shaped when one of nature's most primal sensations is absent. To most of us, pain is scattered across memory in fragments: a childhood fall, a broken bone in youth, the burn of fever, the sting of loss and recovery. These fragments become thresholds, learning experiences embedded into who we are. But for those born without this language, the timeline of memory looks different. It is not built from warnings but from consequences, not from signals that arrive in time, but from discoveries that arrive too late. Early childhood is when this difference begins to widen most clearly. A parent may look at their child running across pavement or climbing into a tree and feel unease rather than pride. Other children stumble, cry, and slow down, through which caution is learned. But these children move forward relentlessly, without pause, without signal. Their energy is often mistaken for fearlessness, but it is not bravery. It is ignorance of risk, not from a choice of personality, but from a silence of nerves. Courage is often defined by knowing fear and facing it. In these lives, the absence of fear is not heroic but hazardous. Like a candle burning brightly without sensing the wind, the flame is unaware until it is fragile. The world is built for people who feel pain. It is everywhere in the design of our routines. Medication exists to soothe it, safety instructions exist to prevent it, laws and precautions grow from respecting its reality. The advice given in childhood, don't touch the stove, be careful with sharp tools, rest when your body aches, is advice written into culture precisely because bodies signal in those ways. Remove the signal, and the world stops making sense. The stove still burns hot, but the hand does not flinch. The blade still cuts, but the skin carries on until it bleeds. The ankle still twists, but no limp follows until the joint collapses completely. And so families of those with congenital insensitivity to pain live with boundaries others never need to think about, crafting a second layer of rules that must be enforced not by nature's cues, but by conscious vigilance. Imagine adolescence in this landscape. Teenagers are already explorers of limits, testing the reach of their strength, speed, and freedom. For someone who cannot feel pain, this age becomes an especially fragile theater of risk. They may leap higher, run harder, climb farther than their bodies can endure. Injuries that sideline others become invisible companions, carried quietly until bones misalign or the body refuses its own weight. In classrooms and on sports fields, these adolescents are not singled out for obvious weakness, but for something far more confusing: scars and injuries that appear without story. Bruises too large, fractures appearing too often, bandages explaining what words cannot. Teachers and peers may struggle to make sense of it, unsure if these wounds carry hidden explanations, when in truth, the explanation is hidden not in secrecy but in silence. Adulthood shifts the story again. Now the burden of safety falls more heavily on the individual. Family cannot shield forever. A young adult living with CIP must navigate kitchens, workplaces, streets, and relationships with an inner map that lacks the landmarks of sensation. Cooking becomes an act of calculation, every pan and pot a silent bargain. Exercise requires not only effort but also the imagination of pain that does not arrive, to stop before exhaustion, to rest before injury. Friendships and relationships bring their own complications. How does one explain this difference in ordinary conversation? How do you tell someone that you have never felt what they complain about daily? That you do not understand headaches, toothaches, stings, or sprains except as concepts in books? Intimacy, trust, vulnerability all are shaped differently when one body lives without signals the other body takes for granted. Beyond the personal and family struggles lies the larger realm of medicine and research. Scientists peer into the lives of those without pain not as spectators of anomaly, but as students of mystery. In their blood, in their cells, in the scripts of their genes, lie keys that could unlock new futures in medicine. Those who cannot feel pain hold the map to quieting it in those who feel too much. From a molecular level, researchers attempt to trace how particular channels in the nervous system are silenced, and how replicating that silence in controlled ways might change the world of chronic illness. The paradox is profound: those who suffer from an absence may one day help those who suffer from abundance. Still, the human reality does not disappear beneath the layers of science. Families cannot wait for discoveries to relieve the immediate burdens of daily life. They live with constant checkups, frequent scans, and hospital visits that sometimes blur together. Casts, bandages, braces, surgeries, not for injuries that screamed, but for injuries that stayed quiet until they damaged deeply. Care becomes proactive, a discipline built into routine. Mothers and fathers grow eyes trained like instruments, able to spot the subtle limp, the faint swelling, the tiny changes that reveal what their children cannot feel. Children grow into adults familiar not with the vocabulary of pain, but with the language of precaution, caution, necessity. And yet, in their lives, there are glimmers of wonder too. Freed from minor pains, they sometimes discover capacities that others envy. They can push through barriers others cannot tolerate. The marathon runner who feels exhaustion more than agony, the climber who moves through bruises that never announce themselves, such abilities can emerge. But every seeming advantage carries its shadow, for behind every achievement lies the risk of unnoticed collapse. Stories accumulate of athletes who trained until their joints disintegrated, of children who laughed as they injured themselves beyond repair, of adults whose seeming resilience left them scarred inside and out. What looks like strength is often unguarded fragility, and so even glimpses of advantage must always be understood in balance with overwhelming risk. The philosophical reflection here is inescapable. To live without pain is to live without feedback, to move through existence without the boundaries that sculpt growth. Pain teaches not only the body but also the soul. It breeds empathy, for in knowing our own suffering, we recognize it in others. Remove this element, and the bridge between self and other is altered. Though one can still care deeply, the resonance of that shared language is missing. And yet, those who live without pain often develop extraordinary empathy in another way, not by comparison, but by imagination. Knowing their difference, they learn to listen more closely, to connect beyond the physical, to understand through patience rather than sensation. Their empathy becomes intellectual, imaginative, spiritual, rather than physical. As stillness deepens in your own body listening to these words, consider what this absence reveals about the presence of pain in your life. Consider the countless moments in which discomfort recalibrated your path. A minor ache told you to rest, preventing greater harm. A burning sensation made you withdraw from danger. A wound taught caution, patience, recovery. Without these signals, the rhythm of life changes completely. And so, as the narrative stretches itself gently, let it remind you not of suffering, but of the indispensable role that suffering plays in keeping us whole. To fall asleep to this knowledge is not to dwell on pain, but to sleep inside a larger appreciation of wholeness. The body, imperfect as it may seem, carries within it tools of survival often misunderstood. Pain, unpleasant as it is one of those tools. Its presence is reassurance, a quiet whisper that nature is aware, that the body is connected. As those without it drift through their own unpredictable landscapes, their stories invite us to feel gratitude for the very discomfort we so often reject. Gratitude that our body speaks, even harshly, rather than remaining silent in the face of danger. This story continues, beyond individuals, beyond families, into the collective awareness of what it means to be human. Pain shapes culture, rituals, healing traditions, spiritual metaphors. It is written into myths and sacred texts, into art and poetry. Absence of pain, by contrast, is rarely portrayed because it sits at the edge of imagination. Only in these rare cases does absence become visible. Only in their lives do we glimpse humanity stripped of one of its oldest languages. That glimpse changes us, even as it humbles us. As we linger here, the quiet accumulates like a slow tide. You may feel yourself drifting, your breath stabilizing, your muscles softening, your mind carrying this narrative into the recesses of dream. The words themselves need not be clung to or analyzed. They may simply pass through you like the hush of wind, like a gentle current moving without sharpness. In that drift lies the heart of storytelling, not to overwhelm, but to accompany. And so the story of those without pain drifts with you as you rest, its paradox echoing softly. Pain, unwelcome as it is, remains a guardian. Its absence is not peace, but danger. Its presence, harsh as it feels, is one of nature's quietest gifts. And in that recognition, gently, fully, we see the fragile truth of existence, that sometimes what we long to escape is precisely what protects us, and what we take for granted is what keeps us whole. The night deepens as the story continues, a river of reflection carrying us gently into its quieter corners. The tale of those who cannot feel pain is not a story that ends quickly. It unravels slowly, like a thread pulled from fabric, leading us further into questions about the body, about survival, and even about what it means to live. At first glance, this rare condition might appear simple to describe. A child is born, nerves miswired, pain never arrives. But the truth, as we drift further inside, is far more layered. It is not merely the absence of a sensation, it is the shaping of an entire existence around absence, like a life built in a house with missing walls, where every season enters freely and each shelter depends on watchfulness rather than instinct. Consider once again what happens when we remove this single element pain that most of us wish away. Remove it, and every act changes meaning. Eating, usually a simple pleasure, becomes a field of hidden dangers. Biting the tongue without flinching. Chewing through food too hot to consume safely. Breaking a tooth without ever noticing the damage until it shows itself in silence. Walking becomes uncertain not because of hesitation, but because of overconfidence. Without the stinging reminder to stop, the bones bear pressure they cannot withstand. Sprains remain untreated, joints fracture quietly. The quietness itself becomes the greatest presence. Families learn to imagine pain on behalf of the one who cannot feel it. A mother sees her child stumble and instantly feels within her own body what her child should have felt. A father notices a sharp corner and his body recoils as though struck, protecting not himself but a child who moves oblivious. Parents become translators of pain, sensing it not as theirs, but as borrowed from a life that cannot sense it alone. This translation extends through years, becoming almost second nature. The parent's eyes sharpen into instruments, measuring every motion, scanning every limb. A child with CIP grows under supervision so attentive it feels invisible, not burdensome, because it is constant and necessary. Unlike other vigilance, which can afford lapses, this watchfulness cannot rest. A single injury unnoticed leads to consequences that shape life permanently. And so, in these families, love transforms into a discipline, a ritual of checking, touching, testing, of gently examining without frightening, of protecting without smothering. To live with CIP is to live in homes where love is bound tightly to watchfulness, where affection is measured in medical care, and where the line between nurture and necessity dissolves into something timeless. Yet as children grow, they begin to reflect on their difference. They notice the strange gap between themselves and others. A playground is often the first classroom of this realization. Other children fall, cry, scream, and are comforted. The child with CIP falls, and stands back up without pause, only to be pulled aside by alarmed adults who see blood, bruising, swelling. Confusion rises. Why do others stop when they do not? Why is their mother's face filled with fear when their body insists nothing has happened? This contradiction builds with time, shaping the way they view themselves, not as stronger but as unusual, different in ways they cannot yet explain. Self-awareness grows slowly in these children, but when it arrives, it brings with it both curiosity and isolation. Teenagers with CIP often articulate their reality as best they can, but translation remains difficult. To say I don't feel pain means little until others witness the proof. Teachers, friends, and even doctors struggle to comprehend at first. Stories abound of families accused of negligence or secrecy because the frequency of injury seems too high for coincidence. Only after repeated tests, genetic confirmations, and accumulated medical history do outsiders begin to accept the truth. And yet, even then, many continue to misunderstand. They believe it must be a gift rather than a curse. They imagine freedom from pain's grip, failing to understand that pain is a compass, not a chain. Explaining otherwise requires patience, but words alone rarely succeed. How can language describe the absence of an entire dimension of experience? Adulthood brings not only responsibility, but reflection. Adults with CIP become philosophers of their own lives. They explain it differently depending on who listens. To scientists, it is a condition with genetic foundation, a miswritten sequence in the body's code. To friends, it is a peculiarity, a quirky fact. To loved ones, it is a silent burden carried each day. And to themselves, it is a paradox, sometimes liberating in moments when they surpass what seems unbearable to others, but always shadowed by the knowledge that a safeguard is missing. One may walk across hot pavement barefoot without flinching, but the burns will later demand treatment. One may endure medical procedures without anesthesia, but the damage done remains real even if no scream rises. And in that paradox lies a truth almost impossible to convey: freedom without warning is not freedom, it is another form of captivity. The medical world continues to study these rare individuals, each case a living textbook in the complexity of nerves. Researchers peer into these bodies as into rare instruments, hoping to glean sounds absent everywhere else. Their insights deepen our understanding of the nervous system, but even as studies progress, those who live without pain must still face the daily weight of their condition. Science moves at its pace, careful, cautious, methodical, while life does not pause, and bones still break, skin still burns, injuries still arrive without premonition. Families learn to hold both realities, the promise of future discoveries and the urgency of daily survival. Yet even within challenge, beauty emerges. Many individuals with CIP live vibrant lives, filled with joy, laughter, and creativity no less than anyone else. They paint, they sing, they work, they build relationships filled with love. Pain shapes neither personality nor imagination, and so their inner worlds can be as vast as any poet's, as inventive as any dreamer's. The scars upon their bodies do not erase the light in their eyes. If anything, their stories illuminate more brightly what it means to live with difference, what it means to endure beyond misunderstanding, what it means to accept fragility and strength as partners in the same body. Their resilience is not forged in the fire of suffering but in the silence of it, in the gentle yet unrelenting balancing act of living deliberately every day. Consider, too, the philosophical echo their lives create for the rest of us. We, who often curse pain, who seek to numb it with medicine and distractions, are reminded through them of its deeper value. Pain is unwanted, yet necessary, harsh, yet protective. It guards us not only against physical damage, but also against arrogance and recklessness. It humbles us, slowing us down, teaching us patience, compelling us to heal. Remove it, and the world becomes strangely dangerous. Their lives mirror back to us what we forget: pain is not always enemy, it is often teacher, and sometimes savior. As this awareness settles around you, drifting gently like falling dusk, let yourself breathe more slowly, sinking into the embrace of thought and rest. The words no longer demand analysis, they become rhythm. They spread calmly like ripples across a lake, each one expanding, overlapping, fading into stillness. Within this rhythm is the story of absence, the story of silence that shapes lives in unseen ways. For those without pain, every breath carries risk, every day becomes a negotiation with danger. And yet, in their presence, many find joy. Not diminished, not erased, but joy made sharper by fragility, joy sharpened by awareness. Theirs is not a lesser existence, but a different one, one that forces those around them to reconsider what it means to be human. Now imagine yourself within this stream, understanding pain not as curse but as guardian. The truth of this rare condition lingers softly, not frightening, but humbling. To know their story is to look back upon oneself with new compassion, to see one's own aches and throbs through different light. For every burn that taught caution, for every wound that demanded healing, for every moment of hurt that redirected your steps, those were the silent guardians at work, protecting, teaching, guiding. Without them, you would have been left in silence. Silence not of peace, but of danger. Silence not of freedom, but of absence. Those who live in that silence remind us of its cost. As you rest deeper, their truth folds into your breathing. It is not a truth of fear, but of gratitude. Gratitude that pain exists, gratitude that the body speaks, gratitude that nature fashioned this signal. Even as you drift further into warmth and sleep, let these thoughts accompany you. Behind every ache lies protection, behind every sting lies care, behind every cry lies survival. The story of those without pain is the story of why we need it, the silent lesson of rarity that teaches the universal importance of what we would rather reject. And so the night continues, carrying with it both silence and awareness, reminding us gently, endlessly, that even suffering can be a safeguard, and that absence can sometimes be the deepest reminder of presence. The story unfolds more deeply when we step into the futures that these rare lives must navigate. Imagine, as softly as a dream, how the presence or absence of pain reshapes every possibility. Life with congenital insensitivity to pain is not only the story of childhood discoveries or the caution of parents, but the long, slow arc of an entire lifetime guided by a silence within the nerves. In that silence, choices are made differently, futures carved differently, and destinies framed not by suffering but by what is missing. As one grows older within this rare condition, the nature of the challenge changes. Childhood is a time of constant correction, where parents act as the translators of unseen wounds. Adolescence is a testing ground of boundaries, where the absence of pain collides with the surge of energy and curiosity. But adulthood stretches that difference across responsibilities, relationships, and identities, demanding an awareness that never leaves. One learns to live not only in one's own body, but also inside careful calculations. Every step, every choice of task, every touch of the environment must be weighed against possibilities invisible to instinct. The world, to them, is not a place of warning signs but a landscape into which they must invent their own signals. Work itself takes on an entirely different weight. Professions that require physical endurance or contact with risk are closed doors. Construction work, heavy lifting, firefighting, even simple culinary tasks become labyrinths of danger. Imagine chopping vegetables without knowing the sting of a cut. Imagine working near open flames without the flinch of heat to draw the hand back. Professions that demand that foundation of protective instinct are not safe, leading many into paths that limit physical risk while still allowing mental creativity and contribution. It is not incapacity, it is redirection. And those with congenital insensitivity to pain often prove inventive at navigating these filters. They discover careers in arts, in writing, in research, in worlds where the absence of one sense does not limit the infinity of thought. Yet even there, accommodations must be made, breaks to check the body, caretakers or self-check routines to ensure nothing has gone unnoticed. And relationships, those most intimate landscapes of human life, carry their own unique shape. To trust someone else is already a form of vulnerability. To live without pain is to require vulnerability in new forms. Partners often become protectors, not only lovers. They learn to notice details, spotting swelling in an ankle or redness in skin. The bond becomes one of extraordinary closeness, aligning attention, alertness, and care. But there is also a weight that grows. The partner may feel both fear and responsibility, knowing they must help replace the signals missing within the other. For those who live this reality, relationships deepen through this fragile balance, becoming not only about companionship but about shared survival. Love proves itself not in words alone, but in constant acts of noticing. These small moments build a unique kind of intimacy, one that flourishes under necessity, and yet transforms into something profound and enduring. For children born into families where elders live without pain, there is also inheritance not in the genetic sense alone, but in the shaping of perspective. Children grow up learning that bodies are not invincible, that the absence of suffering in one life can still carry immense risk. They are taught caution not only for themselves, but for a parent who cannot sense harm. Family traditions and routines adopt the tone of discipline blended with affection. Bandages sit easily beside kitchen utensils. Medical kits rest beside books. Doctor visits are not interruptions of life but woven threads of life itself. And in this environment, children of such households develop qualities often rare in the wider world: responsibility, patience, and empathy cultivated from an early age. The medical stories embedded in these lives are endless. Each one could be its own quiet chapter. Consider the figure of a child who fractured an arm and continued to play until parents noticed the strange angle of movement. Consider the adult who discovered severe burns on their hand only after noticing the smell of charred skin. Or the elder whose body revealed fractures upon X-ray that had been walked upon for months. Each story shocks outsiders, yet within the community of those who live with CIP, it is an ordinary truth. Injuries accumulate not through recklessness, but through invisibility. Pain prevents accumulation; without it, scars build like layers of sediment, a geological record of danger unannounced. The body tells its story in silence, marked not by cries but by scars. Science continues to examine them carefully, because within their bodies researchers glimpse the mysteries of sensation. Pain is not a singular element but a cascade of electrical and chemical signals, carrying urgency across fibers toward the brain. To silence this cascade is to silence an entire orchestra of nature. Specific genes, such as those involved in sodium channels, reveal the keys to this silence. In laboratories, scientists trace these pathways, testing carefully, hoping to understand not only why pain vanishes in these rare lives, but how it might be quieted in others who feel too much. Out of this research emerges potential therapies for countless conditions: neuropathic pain, inflammatory disorders, degenerative diseases. The paradox deepens: those who cannot feel pain become guides for those who feel it without end. Their silence may one day heal unrelenting noise. Yet medical knowledge cannot erase the human dimension. For every advance, for every potential drug, families still wake each day with the same vigilance. And in the meantime, those who live with CIP form communities, often small, scattered across nations, but connected by shared narrative. They find one another online, through support groups, through medical networks. They exchange stories, warnings, experiences. In those exchanges lies comfort, the awareness that their rare difference is understood by others even if the broader world cannot understand. In these communities, they are not anomalies, but kin. The philosophical weight of their lives echoes across a wider landscape. It invites us to reconsider not only pain, but the very structure of human experience. Pain is often placed in opposition to pleasure, as if life were simply a scale balancing two forces. But the lives of those without pain remind us that suffering is not only about opposition, it is about structure. It shapes the boundaries within which joy can be meaningful. Without pain, pleasure itself risks distortion, for pleasure partly emerges through contrast. The coolness of water feels exquisite because heat and exertion cause ache. Relief arrives because suffering preceded it. Remove suffering altogether, and relief dissolves. Without relief, joy changes its flavor, no longer sharpened by the memory of its opposite. There is, then, a deeper truth hidden within the paradox: pain adds meaning. The absence of it strips meaning from some of life's most ordinary yet profound experiences. To those who cannot feel it, the world may seem less sharp in places, more muted in warning, sometimes broader in opportunity, but also emptier in essential contrasts. And yet, they live fully, discovering ways to sculpt meaning in alternative ways, building by thought and imagination what the nerves cannot provide. As you drift within these reflections, feel how the rhythm of their experience settles into yours. The absence of pain makes their lives fragile, but fragility itself holds beauty. Think of glass, delicate yet luminous, vulnerable, yet treasured for its transparency. Their lives are mirrors of such fragility, fragile but luminous, vulnerable but deeply significant. In silence, they walk through the world, and in learning their story, we understand more about ourselves. Pain, which we often wish gone, emerges now as something to thank quietly, as an unlikely ally, as a constant reminder that our bodies are looking after us. You may notice your breath softening as you think of this. You may feel your body resting more deeply. That is what the story invites, not worry, not fear, but reflection. Pain will still visit you in life, as it visits us all. But now, that visit may arrive differently, not merely as a nuisance, but as a presence with purpose. And with that thought settling gently in the mind, the body can rest more fully in sleep, knowing even discomfort has meaning, even difficulties play their role. The story of those without pain drifts onward like a current, and as it carries us further, it continues to remind, softly but firmly, that in what we reject may lie what we need, and in what we envy may lie hidden burdens we cannot see. The deeper we follow this journey into the realm of lives without pain, the more it unfolds as something larger than science, larger than the quiet anecdotes of families and loved ones, and larger even than medicine itself. It becomes a meditation on the delicate structure of existence, on the balance between absence and presence, and on the fragile architecture that allows us to survive. Pain, which we so often curse in our daily lives, reappears here as a bridge, a constant whisper of biology saying, "This is dangerous, turn away." To live without that whisper is to live upon a path without signs, streets without lights, oceans without currents. The body becomes a vessel adrift, powered still by life but lacking one of the most essential tools of navigation. In this drifting lies a paradox that stretches across time. For though pain feels temporary to us, passing like storms, dissolving like fevers, its absence is permanent in those touched by this rare condition. The absence is not episodic. It does not come and go. It remains like a shadow stitched tightly to them, invisible until reflected in scars and fractures. Every season of life must be lived beneath that shadow. They cannot imagine, cannot remember, cannot produce the cry that rises unbidden in the rest of us at the moment of harm. And so each new stage of existence demands new adaptations, each era of life requiring vigilance freshly learned, not through instinct, but through inventiveness. Consider the body itself, viewed from the inside. Cells arranged in elaborate designs, neurons firing with electricity, blood moving in pulsing patterns that mark the rhythm of being alive. At the surface of it all lies the nervous system, branching like roots of a great tree. Each root sends messages toward the center. For most of us, those messages flood with alarms. For those with congenital insensitivity to pain, those pathways fall silent, as though wires stretch across distance without transmitting. Imagine an orchestra without its percussion, a song without its pulse, a play without its timing. All motion continues, but the rhythm is missing. Life becomes unsynchronized with the ordinary patterns of response. That silence inside the wires is both fascinating to researchers and devastating to those who must rely on it as their reality. If you close your eyes and imagine such silence, it feels peaceful at first. Imagine walking across thorns and feeling nothing. Imagine pulling splinters without tears. Imagine enduring dental procedures without anesthesia. Imagine jogging long miles without aching muscles. At first, these appear as superpowers. But allow the meditation to continue, and the shadows appear. The thorns become infected because they were never noticed. The splinters remain, slipping deeper into flesh. The teeth dissolve quietly, cavities advancing like slow fires in the dark. The jog twists joints past their limit until knees collapse. Every gift, in silence, becomes the opposite of itself. That is the nature of this paradox. Silence becomes noise of another kind, noise of consequence without warnings, noise of constant hidden peril. Families who live in this reality speak often of exhaustion. Exhaustion not merely physical, but emotional. They cannot relax into ordinary life without carrying the tight coil of caution. Other parents watch children fall, comfort them, and feel reassured that the lesson has been learned through tears. Parents of children without pain gather their children, dress wounds discovered only too late, and realize no lesson is encoded by the body. They must teach endlessly, not with instinctual reinforcement, but with words, reminders, and vigilant correction. And as years pass, the weight of this vigilance shapes them. It creates resilience, yes, but it also drains. Nights become cycles of checking limbs, examining skin, watching breath, ensuring safety. And every passing day brings with it the possibility of hidden injury. Love here is not soft background warmth, it is sharp, constant awareness, a flame that never dims. Adults who live with this condition sometimes describe their identities in terms that reflect both strangeness and pride. They speak of being invulnerable, yet vulnerable. They describe themselves as both incapable of weakness yet endlessly breakable. It is a contradiction they carry inside language, sometimes laughing to cover the pain they cannot feel, sometimes explaining with patience to those who ask curious questions. Strangers marvel when they explain. "You never feel pain? That must be incredible." The truth behind the marvel cannot be explained simply, for how can one explain that the silence is not liberation but another kind of noise, the noise of uncertainty, the noise of hidden harm? And yet, these individuals persist, creating meaning in lives that others cannot imagine, navigating existence by inventing new forms of awareness. Medicine continues its quest among them because the promise they carry is immense. Imagine the possibility of unlocking their silence, of learning to reproduce it in ways that are controlled and safe. For those who live with migraine, with arthritis, with unending back pain, with cancer that devours sleep through relentless signals, the promise of relief sits hidden in the biology of those without pain. Here the paradox repeats once again: the suffering of the many may be relieved through the rare difference of the few. Strips of DNA, coded differently, may one day allow researchers to design treatments that let patients quiet their pain when they choose, reintroducing calm where only fire exists now. The few guide the many, even as the few endure struggles most cannot understand. Philosophy lingers in these discoveries. What is a human being, if not a creature defined by sensation? We are aware because we feel. We are cautious because we hurt. We are empathetic because our sufferings mirror. Remove suffering, and are we not changed in essence? Perhaps reduced in understanding, perhaps altered fundamentally. The absence of pain is not merely an absence, it is a change of dimension. The picture of life drawn without that color looks strange, incomplete, destabilized. To contemplate it is to realize how vital the spectrum of sensation is, not only for survival, but for identity. And so, in these reflections, gratitude begins to form quietly. Each bruise remembered, each cut, each moment of discomfort, suddenly they are not nuisances but teachers. They created your boundaries, they sculpted your path. Without them, your life would have collapsed inward upon consequences. Pain was not your enemy but your guard, shaping not only your safety but also your sense of self in the world. To live without it is to live without the handrails of being, without the compass in the storm. As this story continues winding gently, you may feel yourself drifting deeper into calm. The images, the reflections, the slow rhythm of sentences settle over you like waves upon an endless shore. Let them carry you without effort, without resistance. Allow the mind to soften as you drift, allowing the paradox to circle again and again, sinking deeper into recognition. What was once hated as curse becomes recognized as safeguard. What was once envied as freedom reveals itself as fragility. And in this turning, the story returns to you differently. It is no longer only about them, but about all of us, about the delicate architecture of our own lives, guarded by sensations we so easily misunderstand. The rare silence of congenital insensitivity to pain becomes then not only a medical anomaly, not only a scientific puzzle, it becomes a mirror. It reflects our own voices of suffering and teaches us to hear them differently. It reflects our own aches and demands we see them as signs of life, signs of protection. It reflects the fragility of existence and the sacredness of feeling, both pleasure and pain, as part of the same fabric. And as you breathe, as stillness deepens into the body, let this reflection rest with you, calm and unbroken, like a thread woven through your dreams. Day will return with its demands, with its irritations and discomforts. Pain will inevitably visit in small or large ways. But knowing this story, you may welcome those visits differently, with less resistance, with more understanding. For they are companions of survival, witnesses of the body's care. And in that understanding lies not fear, but relief. And so the story carries on, both within you as you rest tonight, and across the world in the lives of those rare few who live forever in silence. Their stories remind us what is missing, and in missing, what is essential. Their lives become lessons without intention, teachers without words, guiding us back into gratitude for the very signal we long to escape. We do not need to envy their silence. Instead, we need only to understand its cost, and cherish our own voices of pain as the guardians they are. The tide of narrative has carried us far, but its rhythm remains, slow and gentle, reminding us with every rise and fall of the paradox at the center of this meditation, that within suffering lies protection, and within absence lies hidden peril. And as this rhythm moves softly through you, it draws you nearer to rest, carrying you across the threshold of sleep where stories dissolve into dreams, but their truths linger still. As the story deepens, the silence of lives lived without pain carries us further into reflection. It is not a silence that soothes, not the quiet of evening settled upon a landscape, but a silence that unsettles, that hides hidden storms beneath a calm surface. When we picture a life without pain, the mind first imagines ease. Yet true ease comes from safety, and safety arrives when there are signals, borders, warnings. Without them, danger becomes the unspoken constant. And in such lives, the silence of painlessness transforms into the background music of perpetual risk. We often measure the body through its limits. Limits defined by what we can endure, what stops us, what demands we rest and retreat. To understand someone who does not feel pain is to understand someone stripped of those limits, not in a liberating way, but in a perilous collapse. They can endure what others cannot, but they endure too much. Their bodies take damage without the protective resistance that the rest of us encounter long before injury deepens. Joints wear thin, bones carry cracks, infections spread invisibly, all moving forward without cry, without signal, until damage becomes undeniable. Their strength is real, but it is not chosen, their endurance is vast, but it is dangerous endurance. And as they move through life, the marks of this endurance accumulate. Over time, their bodies reveal not invincibility but fragility. Scars line their skin, fractures reshape their bones, small deformities emerge from repeated unnoticed injuries. These are not signs of carelessness but of a body that never warned them. Each scar is a story told silently, each fracture a secret chapter only discovered by accident. Their bodies hold a memory that their minds never shared, the memory of pain withheld, the memory of absence etched into tissue. These hidden histories follow them as they age, carrying the lifelong dialogue between fragility and survival. Daily existence becomes a ritual of checking. Not only doctors, not only families, but the individuals themselves learn to perform constant examinations as if inhabiting both the roles of patient and caregiver. They press against their own bones to feel for tenderness they cannot feel. They check their skin visually for blisters, bruises, or cuts they did not notice. They monitor fatigue, balance, posture, searching for clues that the body is injured in ways it refuses to confess. Imagine living each day as your own detective, piecing together mysteries without clues of sensation. This becomes their way. Instead of instinct, discipline. Instead of alarm, observation. Instead of reaction, scrutiny. And yet, even within the quiet burdens of this condition, lives remain filled with laughter, connection, meaning, and resilience. A child who cannot feel the sting of scraped knees still feels the joy of playing with friends. A teenager who cannot feel the exhaustion of overexertion still feels the thrill of moving freely. An adult who cannot sense the burn of hot water can still sense love, still sense trust, still sense beauty. Their lives are shaped not only by what is missing, but also by what remains, and what remains is immense. The full range of thought, imagination, happiness, the warmth of human connection is untouched by their condition, rising to become one of the most vital anchors of their identity. This duality, of absence and presence, is where their story finds its deepest weight. They lack an essential safeguard of sensation, but they gain insights into life that few of us ever confront. They teach those around them the value of awareness, the importance of gratitude for signals unnoticed, the sacredness of fragility. They remind us that the things we despise, such as pain, are often what preserve us. Their daily struggles elevate those around them into deeper presence, drawing families, communities, and even scientists into richer attentiveness. In their lives, others learn to pay attention, to protect, to nurture, to reflect. Science watches closely, not in cold detachment, but in sustained fascination. For researchers, each rare case of congenital insensitivity to pain is like encountering a singular text in a vast library. It is a book that should not exist, yet here it is, pages written differently from every other. By reading it carefully, scientists hope to uncover new treatments, not only to replicate the absence of pain where it overwhelms, but also to better understand the mechanics of sensation itself. In such study, the rare few who lack pain may one day change the destinies of millions who feel too much. Their lives, so fragile in practice, may ripple outward into vast future healing. But while research advances slowly, those who live it advance daily through quiet determination. Some become advocates, sharing their stories in order to spread understanding and awareness. They travel, they speak, they explain, bridging the gap between perception and reality. They tell the world that their condition is not a miracle, nor a blessing, but an ongoing negotiation with unseen weight. Others remain private, choosing quiet anonymity, living among family and friends with protective circles built carefully around them. Each approach is valid, each survival unique, but all share the silent backdrop of vigilance. To spend time imagining their perspective is to realize how deeply pain is woven into the fabric of humanity. Not only physical humanity, but cultural humanity. Songs, stories, myths, and wisdom traditions all speak of pain, of its trials and its lessons. The absence of pain erases not only sensation, but resonance with these shared truths. They stand at the edge of a universal human experience, looking into it with detachment. Empathy becomes intellectual rather than experimental. They can imagine your pain without recalling their own, share in your grief but remain distant from your burn or ache. This sense of difference can feel isolating at times, as though they live parallel to the world rather than inside of it. And yet, such isolation often becomes a wellspring of introspection. To live without such a fundamental part of experience is to live in constant reflection, forced to think about what others accept without thought. This reflection gives rise to wisdom. Many who carry this anomaly speak with unusual insight, because they cannot take sensation for granted. They see the human body as fragile and miraculous simultaneously, capable of boundless movement yet secretly vulnerable to collapse. They know in their bones, sometimes quite literally, that to be alive is to be delicate, that strength is never free of fragility. For those listening to this reflection as they drift toward rest, let it remind you gently, the next time pain visits may bring not only irritation but also recognition. Recognition that this small suffering is saving you from a larger one. Recognition that the sting, the throb, the ache, is nature reminding you how to endure without destroying yourself. Recognition that you are alive in every signal that travels along your nerves. To live without such signals is to live precariously. To live with them is to live protected, however unpleasant protection sometimes feels. As time passes, those with congenital insensitivity to pain continue their journey forward into elder years. Old age is shaped differently for them than for us. They do not grumble about aching joints or stiff backs in the same way. Yet their bodies still accumulate damage, and as they age, those injuries reveal themselves more starkly. Their bones may be frailer earlier, their joints eroded from years of strain endured without rest, their skin marked by layers of unnoticed wounds. Their silence does not spare them from deterioration, it merely delays recognition. For families, this stage becomes even more critical, as monitoring grows more intense and medical visits become more frequent. The absence that began as strange novelty in childhood remains a serious burden in elderhood. And still, they smile, they laugh, they live. They love the warmth of others, the beauty of art, the quiet of evening, the energizing touch of sunlight. Their condition does not pale their humanity, it redefines it. And in that redefinition, we see ourselves reflected anew. We see that our wishes to rid ourselves of pain may be misdirected. We see that the endurance of life is not measured by absence of suffering but by how suffering protects us and teaches us. Their silence becomes our lesson, one that flows into the heart quietly but with conviction. Life is not whole without every note, even the harsh ones. Allow this recognition to soften your mind now. Allow it to settle into your body as you drift toward dreams. The story continues, but for you, its rhythm can gently dissolve into sleep. You need not cling to every word. The heart has already absorbed the truth, and the breath has already slowed in response. Let the silence of those without pain serve as a meditation leading you toward deep rest, reminding you that your own moments of discomfort are themselves guardians, still walking beside you, still keeping you safe. As you drift further from waking, carried softly by these reflections, feel the calm expand within you. The world does not end with answers. It continues with mystery. And these rare lives, lived without pain, are not puzzles to be solved fully. They are mysteries to be contemplated, like constellations traced across the night sky. They glow in their rarity, shining on the horizon of human experience, guiding us not with finality but with awe. We learn not by resolving them, but by sitting quietly in their light, as you now sit quietly enfolded by night, waiting for sleep, listening to silence. The silence of lives without pain lingers long after we first imagine it. The mind returns to it again and again, turning it like a stone in the hand, smooth and strange, both lighter and heavier than expected. A condition so rare, woven into so few threads of humankind, and yet it speaks volumes to all who listen. The paradox stays with us: to live without suffering is not to live without danger, but to live within danger's embrace constantly, invisibly, endlessly. Those who do not feel pain move through the world as if through glass, with every step at risk of fracture, every activity shadowed by the unseen. The daily rituals they follow are not unlike meditations themselves. To wake in the morning is to pause and check, to look for bruises, redness, swelling, cuts, or burns that crept in during sleep. To prepare for the day is to choose clothing and shoes not only for comfort, but for safety, considering textures, supports, and protections. Every object in the environment becomes either friend or risk: pots on the stove, sharp utensils, hidden nails in furniture, uneven sidewalks outside the door. What others pass without pause, they must navigate with conscientious awareness. The simplicity of ordinary routines becomes heightened, intensified by awareness. And yet, in that heightened state there is also wisdom, as if their lives teach us that nothing should be taken for granted, and every detail of the ordinary world deserves respect. Imagine a child learning this way. Most children run forward into life, colliding with the world playfully, guided by tears that act as punctuation at the end of danger. Tears and cries form the language through which the body tells its story to those who care for it. For a child without pain, there are no such words. Their bodies do not cry out. Their language is silence, and silence is dangerous. The lessons others learn in a second, they must learn through long words of parents repeating, insisting, warning, reminding. Do not touch. Do not climb too far. Do not ignore. Their learning must come through patience, not instinct, through obedience, not biology. In this is revealed one of the most taxing truths: they must borrow the instincts of others to survive. The teenage years bring their own layers of intensity. Adolescence is a time shaped by defiance, by testing limits and rebelling against boundaries. For a teenager unable to feel pain, this universal pattern becomes even more perilous. They may push their bodies across thresholds until hidden harm builds. They may wrestle, leap, exhaust themselves, aching to prove independence like their peers, but their independence is less forgiving. What others feel in bruises and aches, they will not notice until the consequence is severe. Their sense of agency collides with their condition, and families again find themselves caught in the storm of teaching, negotiating freedom against the reality of fragility. Many families describe these years as the most difficult, for they cannot shield as they did in childhood, yet cannot release protection either. Even in adulthood, when independence is embraced more fully, the risks never disappear. The adult without pain develops habits of hyper-awareness, routines of self-checks, cycles of observation. And still, no routine is flawless. Life is unpredictable, accidents occur, small oversights grow into serious consequences. Yet adulthood also allows the growth of perspective and understanding of themselves not only as different but also as survivors, as people whose lives are instructive in ways others may never recognize. Their strength is not the invulnerability imagined by outsiders, but the resilience cultivated in fragility. They become storytellers of their contradictions, teaching others through presence and explanation. Sometimes, outsiders imagine only the potential advantages. They think of doctors working without anesthesia on such bodies, of athletes running without tiring soreness, of workers enduring physical labor without complaint. But these imaginings are short-sighted. The reality is more complicated by far. Wounds unrecognized become infected and deadly, overused joints collapse before their time, work performed beyond safe thresholds shatters the frame of the body itself. The imagined superpower is only a mirage. The truth is one of constant risk and quiet patience. All the while, science looks at their bodies as repositories of knowledge. Within them, answers may lie to some of humanity's longest struggles. The molecular gates that silence pain in their nerves may someday help design medications that soften the ceaseless screaming of chronic illness. Their silence could birth healing for others who suffer endlessly. And here the paradox grows even deeper: while they live lives woven with unseen hardship, their very difference may one day ease the suffering of countless others. They become unintentional teachers and healers, their struggle spilling into discoveries far beyond themselves. Their painlessness, so isolating, may one day join humanity into greater empathy, into wider relief. But even as medicines are developed, treatments designed, the essence of their existence cannot be altered easily. No pill restores what their bodies never had. For them, the silence remains permanent. What research extends is not restoration, but knowledge, a gift they may give to others, but rarely to themselves. Yet their role in this human story is profound. They remind scientists of nature's mysteries, challenge doctors to think beyond the normal boundaries of care, and awaken in philosophers a new meditation on the role of suffering. The mind cannot help but wander toward metaphor here. Pain is like light and shadow, unwelcome in its burn, yet necessary to define shape. Without light, there is no contrast; without shadow, no depth. To remove pain entirely is to flatten the world, to reduce the dimensionality of experience, making life itself incomplete. Those without pain live within such incompleteness, not by choice, but by fate. And yet, their lives are not reduced, they are redefined. In their redefinition lies the essence of the human spirit, to adapt, to find meaning, to persist even when nature removes what seems essential. To close the eyes and imagine their world is to look inward with new appreciation. Every throbbing headache that forced rest, every sprain that taught caution, every burn that etched memory, every bruise that altered habits, these are not merely nuisances. They are guideposts. They shape us as much as joy, as much as triumph. They are part of the architecture of being human. To live without them makes life quieter, yes, but the quiet hides danger, like still waters covering deep currents. And so the tonight's reflection becomes an act of gratitude. Gratitude for the messages sent through our bodies, however harsh, however unwanted. Gratitude for the alarms that rise within us, even when they interrupt our lives. Gratitude for the very fact that, through pain, our bodies speak. As you breathe slowly, as rest spreads deeper, know that your body's discomforts are not betrayals but companions. They guide you through the labyrinth of existence, where every corner conceals risk. Without them, you would stumble lost. With them, you move, sometimes limping, sometimes pausing, but always surviving. The rare lives lived without pain are like lanterns on the edge of the human horizon. They glow faintly, few in number, but brightly enough to teach us what we cannot always see. Their silence echoes loudly into our understanding. Their fragility makes our resilience clearer. Their difference defines our commonality more starkly. They are reminders, carried quietly across the world, that the very burdens we long to cast off may be what sustain us. As this reflection lengthens, like a river winding endlessly toward the sea, it invites you to drift deeper into stillness. You need not hold every detail. Let it simply wash over you as a mood, as a rhythm, as a recognition. The story is not meant to agitate, but to soothe. It is not told to disturb, but to calm. It is the kind of story that replaces unrest with perspective, restlessness with understanding. For even in exploring fragility, we reach a truth that comforts: the world is balanced carefully, and in that balance lies survival. Those without pain remind us of this balance. They live lives that show both the danger of its absence and the miracle of its presence. And in their stories we find both gratitude and rest. Gratitude for what our bodies give us, rest in the knowledge that even the harshest sensations serve a purpose. And when you slip into dreams tonight, carrying this reflection with you, you may discover that pain itself feels lighter in memory, softer in meaning, transformed from enemy into teacher. Their silence becomes your reminder. Their story becomes your meditation. Their rare difference becomes your guide into gratitude, into stillness, into sleep. As the reflection continues, the mystery of lives lived without pain becomes not only something we observe, but something we slowly carry within ourselves. It is no longer only their story, it becomes a mirror that reflects how we live with our own sensations, our own aches, our own warnings. We begin to realize that pain is not separate from who we are, but woven deeply into the fabric of our identity. To feel pain is to be reminded again and again that we are fragile, and to be fragile is to understand life more intimately. When you think about the days of your own life, you will remember not only the joys but the moments of hurt that define turning points. A fall that taught you to move carefully. An illness that gave you patience. A heartbreak that opened you to empathy. Pain, in all its forms, sharpens memory and deepens meaning. These memories come paired with physical lessons, written into the body as much as into the mind. Those without pain lack not only the sensation but these kinds of memories. Their lives show us how much humanity is constructed from the balance of resilience and the scars of past suffering. Without these reminders, life flows more dangerously, less guided, more uncertain. In the rare silence of congenital insensitivity to pain, the normal rhythms of human life lose their patterns. Imagine again what it means to walk down a street. Every step you take is eased by signals, tiny corrections of balance, subtle warnings of strain in the ankles, gentle reminders from the muscles. Without those signals, you may walk freely, even energetically, but each step risks becoming one too many, each surface a trap too quiet to reveal itself. Walking becomes not only simple locomotion, but a careful act of observation, a conscious task filled with small checks. In this way, what we consider unconscious and automatic becomes for them a discipline, a practice of constant vigilance. In kitchens and workshops, this transformation is dramatic. Heat, sharpness, weight, all tools that carry both usefulness and danger. To cook without feeling the flame, to hammer without feeling recoil, to cut without knowing the sting, such tasks require not only technique but protective imagination. They must imagine the pain they cannot feel, and use that imagined fear as a guide. It becomes a paradoxical kind of discipline, learning to obey a response that never arrives. Unlike the rest of us, they must live half inside the minds of others, borrowing warnings from remembered stories, from parents' voices, from instructions learned instead of instincts born. This act of living partly outside oneself, depending on borrowed senses, forms the core of their survival. And it is exhausting. Exhaustion defines much of the condition not only because of medical interventions or hospital visits, but because of the constant mental weight of vigilance. It is not exhaustion of the body, but of attention. Their minds must carry responsibility for the job pain normally does. Every action becomes doubled, action itself, and the monitoring of action. There is little room for rest in such lives, for rest requires trust that the body will announce harm. For them, there can be no such trust. To close the eyes fully is always to take on risk, unless loved ones remain watchful. And so exhaustion spreads not only within the one who lacks pain, but also into parents, partners, siblings, and caretakers who share the vigilance. Yet alongside exhaustion is love. Because within these families, bonds deepen in unique ways. The necessity of care creates closeness unlike any other. To dress wounds, to guide movements, to be protector and reminder. All these roles make relationships intricate, careful, sometimes tense, but ultimately filled with tenderness. Every act of attention becomes an act of love. Every repetition of a warning becomes a form of care. The family grows into a web of protectors, each member woven into the survival of the one touched by silence. And even as scars accumulate, so too does the evidence of this love, each healed wound a memory of care given and received. The outside world often misunderstands these lives. Outsiders imagine only the lack of pain, not its consequences. They fail to see the countless hospital visits, the lifelong supervision, the constant threats. They speak casually, "It must be wonderful, never to feel pain." But those who live without pain carry a truth heavier than most can grasp. Their freedom is not freedom at all, it is an endless chain of consequences requiring careful management. And so, part of their burden is not only survival itself, but explanation, the constant need to teach others why their condition is not the blessing it might appear. That need for explanation can be isolating, making their difference feel even sharper. Yet, within the silence of suffering, there is also resilience born. For no matter how heavy, they live. They adapt. They find strategies. They discover joy, art, friendship, and dream as fully as anyone. Their bodies may lack one form of signal, but their spirits compensate by overflowing with other signals: creativity, intelligence, humor, compassion. Pain does not define love, and even without it, they love deeply. Pain does not define curiosity, and even without it, they thirst for understanding. And so they prove the fullness of humanity remains intact, even when part of its foundation is absent. Science continues to study their unique condition, mapping its links toward the greater questions of biology. The pathways that silence pain may one day light pathways of healing for others. Already, researchers look toward genetic therapies, targeted medications, ways to translate absence into hope. And here lies one of life's paradoxical beauties, that from the silence of a few may come relief for the many who suffer too much. Their suffering is strange in form, invisible to the senses but heavy in consequence. The suffering of others, loud and relentless, may one day be soothed because of the genetic scripts etched into them. In this exchange, their rarity becomes a kind of gift to humankind. Philosophy lingers in this truth. To lack pain is to stand at the edge of human universality. Almost all of humanity has shared the language of suffering: the cry, the tears, the moan, the limp, the sigh. It is as common as speech, as recognizable as laughter. Those who live without it stand outside that shared language, watching the rest of us from beyond. This places them in a unique role, one of detachment but also of instruction. Their lives make us see suffering differently. Their absence sharpens our presence. Their silence magnifies our cries until we realize how necessary those cries are. And so, as the night deepens and you listen softly, let your body sink into quiet gratitude for the gift you have often rejected. If you have ever cursed the sharpness of pain, think now of what it protects you from. Think of bones that heal because they forced you to stop. Think of skin that closes because it told you to bandage it. Think of muscles that recover because they demanded rest. Every irritation has been protection in disguise. Those without it know the danger of losing it. They remind you gently to embrace what you would push away, to see it as part of survival. Let this reflection draw you further inward, toward stillness. These words do not need to be memorized, they can pass through you like waves. They are not meant to excite but to soothe, not to alarm but to settle. The story of those rare lives is a reminder that gratitude can be found even in places we do not expect. In aches, in stings, in throbs there lies the quiet reminder of protection. Their silence teaches us this lesson in ways words alone cannot. It is carried in their scars, in their vigilance, in their resilience. As you continue drifting deeper, the story widens into the universal. Pain and its absence are not only medical conditions, but metaphors for existence itself. To lack hardship is to lack growth. To lack warning is to lack care. To have everything easy is not to be safe, but to be unguarded. Life teaches through edges, through limits, through signals that tell us when to turn back. Remove them, and the horizon opens, but danger waits close at hand. With them, the horizon is reached slowly, but safely, with lessons etched gently along your journey. The lesson carried by these rare individuals is eternal. It is not written in textbooks alone, though science records it carefully. It is not preserved only in stories, though families share them lovingly. It is written in the very contrast between silence and sensation, absence and presence, weakness and strength. It is a reminder whispered through rarity into the hearts of the many: value what feels unpleasant, because it may be what keeps you alive. Cherish what interrupts your ease, because it may be what ensures your survival. Their lives are fragile, but because they are fragile, they shine like glass in the light of human understanding. And so the narrative stretches onward, unbroken, flowing like dream into dream. It does not conclude but continues, like footsteps along a path that moves toward the horizon. The story of those without pain has no simple ending. It is carried by them across days, across years, across generations. It is carried by families, researchers, communities, and now by you, listening, breathing softly, as night enfolds you. In their silence, you have heard meaning. In their difference, you have discovered gratitude. In their rarity, you have found universality. Allow their lesson to carry you not into fear but into rest, not into anxiety but into peace. For in knowing their silence, you know your own voice better. In knowing their absence, you recognize your own presence more deeply. And in that recognition lies calm, lies stillness, lies sleep. The story now comes to rest, not in resolution, but in reflection, as all deep journeys must. We have walked together through the quiet corridors of lives lived without pain, lives that seem at first as though they hold a gift, but are revealed, step by step, as delicate paths full of hidden weights. From childhood laughter without tears, to adolescence of risk without warning, to adulthood marked by vigilance, and into elder years shadowed by accumulated scars. Each stage of life without pain teaches us, not about distance from suffering, but about the inescapable importance of suffering itself. Pain, in its unwelcome arrival, becomes not only a protector but also a teacher. It forms the shapes of our memories, it sharpens our habits, it sculpts the very edges of survival. Each burn avoided, each cut remembered, each ache endured teaches us the map of safety. The rare lives without it remind us of the map's importance. They remind us that the body is both fragile and wise, and that its cries, though sometimes unbearable, are part of the miracle of being alive. To walk without pain is to walk into danger unseen. To live in silence is to live surrounded by risks that never announce themselves. Families who share this path become guardians, shaping each moment into vigilance and each act of protection into love. And through them, we see another kind of truth, that even when nature fails to provide its safeguards, human tenderness steps in to create new ones. Pain may be absent in their nerves, but it is present in the watchfulness of their parents, in the care of their siblings, in the patience of their partners. Where nature is silent, love becomes the voice that protects. Science, with its patient gaze, continues to learn from these rare conditions. Each discovery unwinds another thread of mystery, each sequence of DNA decoded offering new hope. Perhaps one day, those who live in torment from unending suffering will be soothed by lessons drawn from those who know no suffering at all. In this strange exchange, their silence might become relief for others, their rarity becoming a gift for humanity. They will remain few, but their impact will spread wide, echoing across medicine and healing. And yet, outside of laboratories and clinics, there remains the human truth. To live without pain is not a path of privilege, but one of fragility. Their laughter is still laughter, their dreams still dreams, their joys as bright as anyone's. But beneath their joys lie hidden shadows, where each step and each touch may harbor damage unannounced. Their strength is not invulnerability, but resilience. They adapt, they learn, they grow within absence, proving once again that the human spirit will find meaning even where nature removes what seems essential. For us, listening to their story, the lesson is simple but profound: to reframe our own suffering, to see it as signal, as guidance, even as protection. The next time pain arrives, whether in body or in spirit, perhaps we will remember the ones who live without it. Remember their scars carried in silence, their fractures discovered too late, their wounds untold by their nerves. Remember that what we curse may in fact be what preserves us. And in that remembrance, gratitude quietly returns. The night outside grows deeper as you listen, as the body loosens into calm. These words are not commands, but companions, offered so you may drift into stillness. Let the long rhythm of this story carry you like a tide. You no longer need to hold tightly to details. You may allow them to pass by like waves, gentle, repetitive, soothing. It is not the facts alone, but the music of their truth, that matters now. That truth has already settled within you. You are reminded that fragility is not flaw but essence. That limits are not prisons but protections. That even pain, as sharp as it can be, is part of the quiet architecture of survival. And reminded too that resilience can arrive not only through strength, but also through absence, through adaptation, through the gentle persistence of life itself. The ones who live without pain show us all of this. They show us what it means to survive differently, and in revealing their difference, they illuminate again the delicate wholeness of being human. Now, as the final steps of this journey approach, let us release the weight of the day, allow these voices and reflections to take their place softly within memory, and sink into the depth of rest. The paradox of pain and its absence can drift now, becoming background music rather than foreground thought. Let your breathing slow, your body soften, your mind fall into stillness. Rest is here, as close as your next breath, as near as the closing of your eyes. And to you, my listener, who has shared this long journey tonight, thank you. Thank you for walking with me through these reflections, for carrying your attention gently into the fabric of this story. Wherever you are, whatever pains you carry, whatever silence you inhabit, may these words soften them, may they remind you of the unseen guardrails that keep you whole. May they guide you toward gratitude even in the presence of difficulty, and peace even in the presence of fragility. Now, as you drift into sleep, I send you my warmest wish. May your rest be deep and your dreams be calm. May you wake renewed, carrying not burden but balance, not fear but quiet joy. Good night, and thank you for listening.